Hi everyone, welcome to TokeMoments. My name is TokeMoments. This is your very first time of tuning in. Where have you been all my life? Today we're going to be talking about something that I find very engaging. I talk non-stop about relationship, marriages, and spirituality. You guys know that I'm a child of God, right? You guys know that I'm a friend of God. Actually, there's a difference. Child and friend is even closer. But when we come back, I have with us today a man of God, someone who doesn't speak Christianese, but who is still spirit-filled. Shall I go on? When we come back, you guys get to meet my guest. Welcome back to the show. Today I'm really excited because Pastor Kingsley Okonkwo of David's Christian Center is joining me. Now, I don't take this for granted. I'm such a huge fan, by the way. I see a lot of your clips online. There's some things that I watch of like, you know, what? And then I thought I definitely had to have you on this show because we have so many young and old people. We have so many people who have so many questions when it comes to dating, marriage, and spirituality. So welcome to the show.
Thank you, Toke. Good to be here.
Nice to have you. So Pastor Kingsley, we're going to speak really directly. You know, I know you're a man of God, but I mean, I'm going to, the first thing I would say is I don't really get along with people who speak Christianese because I feel like over the years, you know, religion, spirituality has always been a conversation that is always intertwined. You know, people have certain bias or certain ideals, and you can't really blame them because, you know, the way we were taught to practice Christianity and religion over the years, some of us have learned to think for ourselves, and we realize that, you know, God is not that you do wrong, I give you wrong, or this. Because for a long time in my life, I saw the relationship between myself and God as this master and this guy that, you know, is so strict. So when you have to come to him, you have to be like, if not, you know, because of how we were raised. But, you know, working, living, and just growing, you realize that there's shades of, you know, there's black and white, but there's shades of gray. I mean, I'll just ask you a direct question. There's this huge thing about people who believe that, you know, when you ask them, how do you know this person is the one? And they say to you things like, because God told me. I'm like, how? You know, like, what's the process of really, truly hearing from God and knowing this is your God-ordained partner? Okay,
well, good to be on the show.
Thank you.
I look forward to this. I hope you'll be interested.
Yeah, I hope you will be.
Yes. Yes, God speaking to you. God does speak. God does guide and lead his children. Now, and there are many ways he speaks, but I don't want to go into the whole you know, breakdown of how God speaks, because there are many ways God speaks to some people through the inward witness, through peace in their heart. Sometimes God speaks to you through desires. He plants desires in your heart and connects you with those desires, and all that. There are many ways God speaks, dreams and other things. However, when it comes to marriage, I think some people put all the responsibility on God. Then some put all the responsibility on themselves, but the balanced way is for both. God doesn't run your life in quote. He doesn't want to take over your life, because that's why he gave you the life in the first place, and he gave you free will. But he wants you to walk with him. So it's like the way you look for a spouse is how you look for any other thing. The way you're looking for a car, a house, whatever, you have an idea of what you want. Then you also present that idea. As long as that idea is not, you know, going against God's plan, God now works with you and guides you, you know, to that thing. And because you have an idea of what you're looking for, when you see it, you would know this is God. But
you kind of have, I like the way you explain it, and I like the way I am receiving it as well, and I hope the people at home are receiving it that way. But over the years, we've had so many situations where, for instance, this whole sex before marriage thing, I would share, if you permit me, I would share my beliefs, and you can correct me. You know, I don't really share this often because there's always this, people start to argue. Over the years, I've come to a place where I don't think God is that invested in those things, because sometimes I look in the Bible, the part where Samuel came to talk to David and gave him the instance of the rich man man and the poor man, and the rich man had all this cattle and all this, and the poor man had just one. And the rich man took the one cattle, and David was furious. I was like, who did such a thing, you know? And Samuel was like, well, you did that. He was talking about Bathsheba or whatever. And when he said, God told him that I blessed you, I called you from your father's house, I gave you cattle, I gave you land, I gave you wives. That made me feel a certain type of way. It's like, wives. And he said, if you had once said more, I would have given it to you. It's almost like, at some point, I started to feel like God doesn't really like the girl child. Because the way women were portrayed in the Bible, in so many instances, were portrayed like commodities. It's almost like as a king, you can have wives, you can do this, you can do that. And then you now hear people that will now be like, one wife, one woman, keep yourself chastity. And I'm like, I don't think God is involved in all this conversation, because the people that are like third wives, fourth wives, their children are doing well, presidents. Like, why is it this whole, why do we like to put Christianity in, or spirituality in every single thing?
That's an interesting one. One thing you need to realize, especially when you're looking at the Bible, the life they lived in the Old Testament.
I knew you were going to say that.
It's because it's obvious. The life is kind of different from what we live in the New Testament, and the reasons are many. The cultures they had then, they didn't have the Spirit of God inside of them. In those days, people just had, they had the religion. Basically, God was their God, and they were His people, and they had a way of always manipulating the things to favor them. So that's where, having mmany wives, most of them had, I don't think there's any of those guys in the Old Testament that even had one wife. Most of them, from Abraham to Solomon to David, everybody had many wives, because it was their culture at the time, and it wasn't God's ideal. What you need to realize is that God has His ideal. Every time we move away from His ideal, He's not going to kill you. Because in fact, you can even decide not to serve God. It's your right to do so. However, you can't also always choose the consequences. So that's the mistake people believe. God is not a terrorist, he's not a dictator. You can decide, I can decide to walk on the street and slap somebody. I have a right to do that, and God will be watching me. Now, what happens after that, I will also take it, because God will not be in charge of that too. So what happens is this. So in the beginning, God made it clear that He wanted one man, one wife. That's how He made Adam and Eve. It was clear. Now, people took it.
I have a question about that.
So people took it and started doing what they want. And even in the New Testament, they asked Jesus that. They said, why did Moses now allow us to divorce if you... Because they were asking Jesus, is it okay for somebody to put away his wife? And Jesus was like, no, from the beginning, this was not the plan. So they asked Jesus, why did Moses allow us to do all that? He said, because of the hardness of your heart. So it wasn't God's best. But if you want to insist, this is what you want to do. God is just going to watch you do it. But you will also reap the consequences. So if you look at some of the stories, if you look at David's story, a lot happened in his house with those many wives and many children. There was rape in his house, there was incest in his house, a lot of things, there was murder in his house. But you see, people don't want to read that. They just focus on, he married many wives. Go and check the consequences. Yeah, there are always consequences for everything.
Okay, so the Adam and Eve story, I've always felt like, and I know when we get to heaven, we can ask God all these questions. And for those who are non-Christians, as I said, this is not a religion topic, but the only reason why we refer to Christianity is because we're both Christians. Christianity is only what I know. I've never tried to study any other religion, because I've just been born and bred in this direction. But I also feel like from the beginning of time, when we say one man, one woman, how did the entire creation now come if it was just one man, one woman? Did she sleep with her sons? That means there was incest.
No, she didn't sleep with her sons. Her sons and her daughters definitely would have gotten married.
So that's where probably incest started from?
No, at that time, even up to the time of Abraham, Abraham and Sarah were half brother, half sister.
Sisters, true.
So, at that time, there was no other way the world would populate. And people must always realize that the Bible in itself is a summary. So they're not going to go into some details that they feel is not relevant to your life today.
Is it okay to then look at what you just said right now and feel, if the Bible is a summary of events that took place 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 years ago, these times are very much different from those times, and there are different ideologies and different things that have even happened. The reason for progression is things like this. When you want to progress, you're open to new ideas. You're open. Back then they didn't have planes. Back then they didn't even know what innovation was, school, whatever. But now with those ideas and those ideals, is it okay to say that there's certain things that are a bit archaic and olden days that might not necessarily work in this generation?
It depends on what you mean.
In terms of dating, for instance, okay. I feel like I hear you by God's plan, God's will, but I've also seen a lot of people who marry unbelievers who don't really do this Christian thing. Pastor Kingsley, I've seen people who waited till they were married and married gay guys. I've seen those who were tasting every single thing and ended up marrying the best guys. So it's almost like sometimes it's like, God, if we deny ourselves all this, why do children of God now find themselves in dire and crazy situations?
That's a very beautiful question. Very beautiful question. People need to realize that there is nothing written in the Bible that is for God. So people need to realize that. So if I decide not to sleep around with anybody till I get married, God is not going to give me a reward of a good husband or wife because of that. Everything I did was because of me. That in itself is the reward.
Wow.
So many people think, oh, if I fast, God's going to award me. If I don't fornicate, then God's going to come and with a medal and flowers, and present to me. No. The principles in scripture are for you. They're all it's like your manual. If you buy an Apple phone and you read the manual, Apple is not going to send you a special gift for reading the manual and doing what the manual says. The manual is to help you enjoy and maximize your phone. That is the reward. So what happens to many people is that, okay, I'm not sleeping around. I'm keeping myself to marriage. Now, have I also learned the principles of choosing a spouse, the qualities I need in a spouse?
Can you share those principles? Because Pastor, they're like, listen, like some of us have been around the block and some, and it's like, I got married to a Christian. Don't be unequally yoked. I said, Lord, at least I passed that test. But we were unequally yoked. So what are these principles that I need to know?
There are lots of them, and that is why today we have loads of family life practitioners, because you notice that people spend 7 years to be an architect or thereabout, 7 years to be a doctor, 7 years to be a lawyer. So you see successful lawyers, they have unsuccessful marriages. And there's no big deal in that because they spent 7 years studying law, 0 years studying marriage. So where you invest is where you harvest.
But there are no schools to study marriage.
Good. So that's what I'm saying. So that's where we have family life practitioners. People need to commit more to learning about marriage. So reading books, attending seminars, watching videos, learning. People put learning in their career. People learning. The guys running these cameras and all these things, they've spent time. There are schools for almost anything, but not so much is being done in terms of teaching people. Because just because I'm not sleeping around doesn't mean I'm going to have a good marriage. I have to still learn.
But do you think that's also as a result of our traditions? For instance, you find a lot of mothers telling females when they're getting married, marriage is a gift. You don't know what's inside. When you open it, whatever is inside, you see. And those traditions, which is why I was saying about, I'm not saying the Bible is archaic, but even just this example I'm giving to you, our parents' marriages are completely different from ours. Why? Because our parents spend time educating us. Now, back then, a lot of our parents were match made. Some of them did not even know what marriage is. Just you're 20-something, okay, from the village, marry this man, you both live together. Whatever abuse, trauma, whatever they saw, they didn't even have labels for it. They just saw it as the gift that keeps on giving, right? And then you marry a girl who you've trained, you've sent her to school, you've told her to be able to exercise her voice, stand for your ground, and you're telling her on that day that marriage is a package. Whatever you receive is what you deal with. It wouldn't work because times have changed. So I hear you on the learning part, but do you think our traditions also aid, because the amount of divorces, I'm sure as a pastor you're probably tired.
Oh man, it's amazing. They usually the present statistics is somewhere around 50 to 60%. That means half or a little more than half of marriages are going to end in divorce. Now I even go further to say that even most of the ones that remain undivorced, what they have is still not a marriage.
So what do you think is the fundamental? I know you said learning, but where?
There are a few things. Okay. Number one, a lot of people, as human beings, we are broken. That's why we need Christ in the first place, because we're broken. Things have happened to us. Even just being born into this world is no more the perfect place that God made from Genesis and the Garden of Eden. So man has been broken. So there's guilt, shame, different things going on, low self-esteem and all that. So the first thing towards having a great marriage is first develop yourself, build yourself. When you see a beggar, when you see someone, a full-bodied adult kneeling down, I traveled recently somewhere in Nigeria and I saw that a full-bodied adult, grown man, chest bared everything, kneeling down on the road to beg for money. You know, I was telling my wife, you see, this is not normal. Something has been removed from this guy that made him not to have any sense of ego at all. That I can understand you don't have money and you want to beg for money. I get that. But there are people that beg. There are people that beg executive begging. They wear suit and everything and say, hey, you know, I'm running somewhere, you know, let me just get. That's begging. I understand that. But when you kneel down the road for strangers and you don't mind the world seeing, something has been removed. I understand there are ladies that, you know, maybe have many boyfriends or whatever. But when you stand on the road and publicly say, I'm a prostitute, something has happened to you.
In some countries, they are now legal and
yes.
it's a profession.
Oh, yeah, I know that. But I'm talking about as a human. There are things you don't publicly, boldly identify as and with if everything is normal. I'm just trying to show you that human beings, something has happened to us and it's happening to us that's why somebody can be bold. There are people that even rape and they don't see a big deal with it. Something has happened to their thinking. So their normal is no more normal. That's what I'm trying to say. So something has happened. So one of the first steps towards a great marriage is first healing, making sure your normal is normal. Because what you're calling normal might not be normal. Some people see beating a woman as normal. I hope you know that. In their world is normal. They saw their father do it. They saw their grandfather do it. They saw it. Also, they're not seeing a big deal why they can't slap their wife. They don't understand what the argument is about. I slapped her. Do you understand? So what is your normal? Some women have seen all their life their mother washed down their dad. They saw it over and over. So they don't think it's a big deal in speaking respectfully to each other. Some people are used to shouting at you. So there are many things that people do today that are not normal. So the first step basically is working on yourself. You know, making sure your normal is normal. How do you do that? You line it up with what God's plan is. You see, because there must be a yardstick. Everybody has something they're comparing everything to. And there are three things you can use to measure your yardstick every time. You either use God's word, or you use other people's opinion, or you use your own thoughts. I think the other two are low. You can't use other people because most times people don't tell you the full story. The people you say have a great marriage, you don't know that for sure. In fact, 10 years is not even enough to know if a marriage is great.
Really?
Oh no. It takes a lifetime to know if a marriage has worked. There are people in marriages that are not married. I'm a marriage counselor, so I can tell you that. There are people in marriages that are not married. They are not married. They are just pretending. They are running a crèche system. They are running a school system. They are raising kids. That's what they're doing. They are not, in terms of marriage, relationship. I've seen people that when all their kids finish university, you see the woman say, I'm leaving. And they say, why? She say, all this while she was waiting. All this while. She was waiting just for her kids to be done with school. That's the reason why she stayed. So all the while you think she was in a marriage. In fact, you could go about and quoting that, oh, my auntie is married. And she's happily married. But you don't know that she has a game plan. She was never there. So, you know, it takes a lifetime really to know if a marriage is working. 10 years, no, 5 years. They put that, oh, they're married for 5 years, think they're fine until they announce. All of a sudden that, oh, they're splitting. And nobody breaks up at the spur of the moment.
So I personally don't think, and I'm going to ask to be permitted to speak freely.
Yes, please.
I don't think pastors make the best marriage counselors. I personally don't think pastors, this is not every pastor, but I feel like over the years and from time immemorial, people see pastors as celestial beings, almost gods, Jesus' assistants.
Yes.
You know, the man who's walking this earth you know, some pastors also attribute to people feeling that way because of how they are unrelatable. For instance, if I'm sat in front of a pastor and I'm telling a pastor that my marriage is not working, my husband is not having sex with me, how am I sure that the man that is talking to me has a perfect marriage? Many of them come out on the stage, the wife introduces the pastor before he comes, but some of them didn't even talk to themselves on their way to church, you know, and they don't let us see. Maybe if we had more pastors, which is why, you know, I said to you from the beginning that I don't speak Christianese and I'm not for religion, I'm more for spirituality. I think there's a huge difference, and it took me trying to find God on my own, because if I go by tradition, what Sunday school made me believe, you know, that's why pastors have to put up this perfect persona, which is not real. And some of them do not have the humility to say, Sister T, I can't advise about marriage. There's always this standard, God hates divorce, God hates, but I've never seen someone that has divorced, that was done wrong, that is suffering today.
Yes. It's you're right on a lot of fronts. I also have a lot of grouse with pastors giving advice, you know, in marriage counseling when they are not knowledgeable about it. Some of the worst advice I've seen were given by pastors, and it's because they're not knowledgeable about it. So the problem is not pastors; it's any untrained person giving advice is dangerous. It's the same way you self-medicate, or somebody, your friend, just tells you what to take in terms of drugs. It's a dangerous thing. That's why there are doctors, there are people specialized. So if your pastor is not a trained counselor, then I think you should be a bit wary of the kind of advice he's going to give you. And I think pastors too, if you have a case that is beyond your level of knowledge, refer it. There are a lot of trained people.
Yeah, but what you just said right now, another pastor is going to watch you and feel like, why would he say refer it? Because some of them feel like if they cannot find solution, then God has failed.
No.
I've been in services. I have to speak candidly.
Yes.
I've been in services where you hear the most absurd things. You find out people come to, if a marriage is not working, or even someone has a problem, depression, for instance. Thank God for all the awareness we have right now. In the last 15, 10, 20 years, there's been a massive awareness for mental health that makes people believe that mental health is not the same as spiritual attack. Gone were the days 10 years ago that people would have mental health issues. Parents, because of how they see the place of the church, when they have problems, the first place they run into is the church. And there are these clerics who are not bold enough to say, let's go to. They feel like if they direct you somewhere, they have failed God. Totally. And that's why is the need for the superiority complex when it comes to spirituality and real life issues?
It's true. I don't know why. I think it's just human nature. People kind of feel if they have to refer you, it means they are saying they failed or they are not good enough. And I think we should grow to the point where we can say, hey, I'm not too good at this.
So do you think every church must have a counseling unit? Because when they make those announcements, I'm like, why do you have
every church should have. The only issue is that they have to train the people. So just like I mentioned depression now, the church should have one or two people that is their area. So when a case like that comes, this is the person that will handle it. So it's not just random, counseling. Once it gets to things like mental health, serious marriage issues, whatever, then that's just normal counseling. There's career counseling, there's marriage counseling. They're not the same. So the counselor that is good in career counseling might not be good with marriage counseling. So in the time past, we've just lumped everything together and just given one general advice. But I think, like you said, light is coming, civilization is coming. People are learning now that it's important to have specialists and all that. So it's something. It's basically an African problem. And like you said, light is coming. I think we are now at the stage where people know that they are experts in certain things.
So would you ever recommend divorce?
Oh, definitely. There are times that I've done that a few times. There are times I've even officiated the ending of some marriages myself.
Wow.
Oh yeah. Yeah, there are times it's obvious that there's no future in this thing. Now, of course, as a counselor, my job is not to tell you to divorce.
Is that the counselor or the pastor?
Both. Sometimes, you see the problem with me telling you go and divorce. I really don't want to tell you go and divorce because you won't own that decision. You need to own your decision. So in counseling, we don't tell people go and do this. We would ask you questions that will help you decide what you want to do. Then we'll support you with whatever your decision is. So if you decide I want to leave, you will need counseling on the process. If you decide I want to stay, you will still need support. But we're not going to decide for you, because the reason is that if we decide for you and it backfires, you will say, well, they told me to do this. You won't own that decision.